Welcome back to Pure Accelerate 2026. We're live streaming in Las Vegas. I'm Alison, joined alongside by Christophe, Bertrand, and we're about to kind of go on a journey from the data wilderness to the AI factory. Want to come along?
I do, absolutely, and we have two great guests to do that.
Yeah, let me bring them in now. Joining us on theCUBE, Jason Hardy with NVIDIA, the Vice President of Storage Technology. Welcome to theCUBE.
It's good to be here.
And Shawn Rosemarin, the Vice President of R&D and Customer Engineering with Everpure. Welcome to theCUBE as well.
Thank you.
Same question to both of you. Walk me through your roles at NVIDIA and at Everpure.
Yeah, so at NVIDIA, obviously storage is a very critical part of the AI factory, but we don't actually sell storage. So my role is really to work with our amazing storage partners and really push into the innovation and what we need from them to really power the AI factory forward. And it's everything from the data side of it into how to produce tokens at the rate that intelligence needs to be created at. So it's great to be here.
Great to have you. And Shawn, your role.
Yeah, so I've been at Everpure roughly coming up on 8 years. I have the illustrious responsibility of working for our founder these days, and I look after customer engineering. And the best part of that is everybody always asks me, what is customer engineering? And essentially, I'm the market invoice back to the company. So I spend the majority of my time thinking about what's going on in market intelligence, what's going on in the competitive market, what's going on in what I like to call the waves of technology. If we think of the technology world as an ocean, which way are the waves going? Which way should we point our surfboard? And essentially helping to bring that voice of the market back into Everpure.
Jason touched on your partnership, but walk me through a little bit more, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, so look, NVIDIA and Everpure have been working together long since, or long before the shot heard around the world, the ChatGPT moment. We started to really work closely together back in, I believe it was around 2018. We launched our first solution with the AI-ready infrastructure, essentially saying for companies that were thinking about analytics, the power of analytics. At the time we were talking about things like Splunk, we were talking about some of the other players in the market, and really how could we get storage and compute and networking to ultimately work as one efficient system. Now this is long before we were looking at how do we get maximum utilization out of GPUs and how do we make sure we keep 100% of all GPUs running. But that partnership has only expanded through the years. And obviously you saw a lot of what we're doing this week, not just with certifications, but with what I like to call this real cooperation, this real co-engineering, superpower to really solve for the challenges of AI today.
So let's talk about the AI journey a lot of customers are on now, and some of them are sort of stuck in pilot. Yet we have GPUs, we have storage, we have the infrastructure, it's being built up, certainly very aggressively as we speak. And the partnership and the co-engineering certainly helps with that. So the question is really to both of you, maybe we'll start with you. Jason, what do you think is making people not go all the way quite yet?
I think when we look at it, there's a couple kind of factors that play into that. One is that there is this nervousness to fully commit in. One, there is a cost attached to it, but it's also where to start. What do I do? And then this overwhelming kind of sense of like, well, I've got to get everything in line for this to be something of value, and to see that ROI come from it. So then it turns into the data challenge and the infrastructure challenge and like all the pieces that have to flow together. They get overwhelmed and then they kind of freeze out. So where we like to see how we can streamline through that is like, hey, let's shrink this down into a very focused path and then help walk through what does that mean from the infrastructure, obviously, but also the data side of it and how everything integrates together and being able to push that forward into, ultimately that first success, then that second success, and on from there.
So. Right, and Shawn, same question to you, but really with a twist. You talked about analytics from 7 years ago, big data, right?
Big data, yeah.
Big data, okay.
Big yellow elephant.
Exactly, I remember that, absolutely. I may have been part of that at some point too, in the past. Okay, big data is like a non-event now. Everything's big data. So from Everpure's perspective, why do you think we're not seeing maybe more massive or aggressive adoption in some environments, and actually, or is it changing? Maybe people are getting ready.
I think it is changing, right? One of the best things I love about the messaging that we've really been working on with NVIDIA is centered around this AI factory.
Right.
And just for your audience, bring them kind of into something everybody's familiar with. If we think about a factory, we think about a factory where we're building something, the first question we'd ask ourselves is, what are we building? Are we building socks? Are we making cereal? Are we building cars? And the second question we would then ask is, what raw material do we need to be able to build what it is that we're manufacturing in the factory? And then what machines do we need to convert the raw materials into the end output? What I'm fascinated with is that raw material, because that raw material is data. And the good news is, our ancestors and those generations that came before us thankfully took us in a direction where this is now all digital data.
Right.
But it's not AI-ready data.
Right.
And so that is really the crux of the issue, is what is the difference between data and AI-ready data that allows us to think of it from a term of heavy crude, light crude, oil sands, turn into oil, turn into refined petroleum that I then build with as a raw material. So what does the refinement of your data estate look like to actually make data an AI-ready raw material?
I love that analogy, by the way. I'm going to use that in the future if you don't mind me stealing it from you. Now, you had announced the AI data stream at Accelerate today. Walk us through what that does. Tell us, what from months to minutes actually means for an enterprise data team.
Yeah, so let's think about, first of all, this word of context. Okay, so if I want to build AI-ready data, the first thing I need to do is find that data. Obviously, we acquired OneTouch, now Everpure Data Intelligence. OneTouch allows me to go find the data. And so let's assume I'm building an invoice project. I want to not just find all the invoices, that's a relatively simple task. I want to find all of the context and the other data that supports those invoices, all the purchase requisitions, all the emails that may have gone on, all the bills of lading, all of the approvals that went through that process. I essentially want to collect that into one set of data. I then need to go through and I need to make sure that whether it's PII or secure data, that I essentially can redact anything that cannot go outside the walls of its original place. That's only about finding and classifying and securing. Now I move into data stream and I say, okay, now I need to vectorize and index it. Why? So I can essentially take all the metadata in that collection and I can now point my AI model at the index, at the vectorized database, giving me significantly faster inference while still retaining all context.
Right, because the reality is you can't really have a model with bad data, right?
Well, you can. You'll get a bad outcome.
Well, you get a bad outcome, but you can't for compliance reasons. And clearly with the data intelligence component, you can literally get past that point of not having, or having bad data potentially. But I'm more curious about sort of that next step. How do you really, accelerate, apologize for the pun here, but how do you accelerate to that next level? And then I'll have the same question for you, but from an infrastructure standpoint. But let's start with you. How do you accelerate once you've done that classification? What else do you need?
Yeah, so I have to find it. I have to classify it.
Right.
I then have to connect it, right? So I need to make sure that's a robust set. Now remember, I might have multiple AI models and multiple AI agents doing multiple tasks. The point is, I want to use the analogy of I want to feed the models a high protein diet. I want to really watch what goes in their mouth. Because hallucinations aren't wrong, they're just connections made based on the data set that was provided, right? And so if I'm really watching what I'm loading into that model, and I'm loading that model already with the context of intelligence, which is in that vectorized index, now I know how everything's connected. Now AI doesn't have to think about how it might be connected, how it thinks it's connected. I'm telling it how it's connected. And so that really accelerates getting to the outcome you're looking for, which is that high quality response that can be trusted by a human or another agent to complete a task.
Right. At scale, of course, because everything's fun and games until you add at scale to the equation.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because that's actually right where we're at, right? Many enterprises have spent the last few years building prototypes, building proofs of concept, building ideas, and they've been essentially science projects. They've been, largely cobbled together, a little bit HPC, sort of at its base. And now when they take these projects that are now at the point where they're starting to catch some steam and they try to scale them, they realize that operationally, they can't support it.
Right.
They can't afford it, and they can't support it.
So Jason, actually, let me ask you the question now from an infrastructure standpoint. What do you think the requirements are to be successful and get from that sort of initial, project to the real deployment, to the pilot, to the real deal, to the real production?
I mean, it absolutely, Shawn really hit the nail on the head there. It's like, there is an infrastructure piece of it, obviously. we live in a hybrid ecosystem. That infrastructure could be on-prem, it could be in the cloud, or it will be in both. But really it's about how the data is brought in and then used to feed into the factory, the AI factory, so that we can manufacture that intelligence at the speed at which business needs to operate. But the hard part is not just bringing the data in, it's bringing the right data in. It's being able to understand it, one, where it lives, where it's created, and then being able to funnel that in and feed that through the factory so that we're not just manufacturing a version of intelligence, but we're manufacturing real-time intelligence. So now as data is created, as it's modified, as the ontology of the enterprise continues to evolve and build, now the factory is being fed by these AI data platforms, is how we refer to them, that feed in and provide all the raw material necessary so that the infrastructure executes at the most streamlined and optimized fashion. We extreme co-design across everything, as Jensen puts it, where it's up and down the stack of the 5-layer cake, but also horizontally into and with our partners. So as Everpure continues to drive the data intelligence capabilities, is we work together with them to make sure that our part of the infrastructure is reinforced and fed by their extremely high performant but well curated data ontology to be able to now feed and drive to the outcome that the enterprise needs, which is real-time data, the intelligence necessary to make an informed decision, and ultimately the intelligence to transform what their business does.
So actually, could you double click on the technology partnership, the actual integration, the work you've done together to get to that point?
Yeah, absolutely. So from a work perspective, we at NVIDIA have obviously a vast GPU ecosystem and a tremendous amount of storage, but not a refined product. We have libraries, we have software capabilities, we have all these pieces where we've designed and curated the well-formed AI factory, how this all works together, but ultimately from a final product standpoint, it requires our partners, like what Everpure's been able to do, to take that software, enrich it with their understanding of the enterprise ecosystem and the data necessary and an awareness of the multimodality of how enterprises operate, blend that together so that they get the best acceleration from our capabilities, combined with the best acceleration from their storage capabilities, with now our software and our collaboration of creation of how to take our libraries with their software, bring it together. So now the infrastructure is enforced and powered through the libraries that we create, right, the networking infrastructure that keeps everything moving at speed of GPU, but then also feeding it with the data necessary that we know where it is, but also how to literally transport it across the wire at the rate at which the GPU needs to stay alive, to stay active, to stay busy, to start that ROI.
If a company spends millions on GPUs but doesn't solve its data problem, have they essentially bought, I don't know, a stranded capital?
They've made a great investment that they need to better utilize. And in that is looking at it not just from this kind of myopic, for lack of a better term, point of view of like, great, I bought GPUs, therefore I have AI. It's like, no, I bought GPUs, now I need to reinforce it with the rest of the IT infrastructure to be able to drive that forward. And again, that could be on-prem or in the cloud. It will be in both. How do we bring the right data to that and be able to keep that investment alive so that we can get the ROI out of it, but also realizing that the investment by itself isn't enough. It's now the ecosystem that gets wrapped around it that is needed to drive that forward and get ultimately that outcome.
So in wrapping up, I'd like to ask both of you the same question, which is, well, our viewers, CTOs, CIOs watching this, maybe asking themselves, okay, how do I get myself out of this pilot into production? What would you recommend they do tomorrow or Monday? We'll start with you, Jason.
I always say have a plan.
Okay.
So, I mean, in engaging with thousands of customers, it's always been, I want AI, they rush into it without really a clear goal in mind, or it's said probably far too often, but identify the low-hanging fruit that has high value. And then in that is, what do I need to bring to it to be able to do that from a data standpoint, from an infrastructure standpoint, and then march forward. But keep your eye on the goal of that outcome, and don't get distracted by the nature that Shawn was right. You have to have clean data, or it was you were right, and he's like, but anyway, garbage in, garbage out can still be a problem. So now it's, if I have this goal, I need to prepare the data for that goal, but don't get overwhelmed by the entirety of the data estate. Start to, again, stay focused, stay to the goal, and then march forward, and the more you do that, the more outcomes you create, the easier it'll be, because it's like going to the gym. The more you exercise, the better you get at this. Go for your PR after the third or fourth attempt, when, you've gained enough muscle, enough skill to be able to easily start to execute into this.
And Shawn, what's your take?
So first off, I would be thinking about the fact that, remember, we're sort of at the front end of this evolution, this revolution, this AI revolution. And so getting your employees, your suppliers, your customers, the people in your ecosystem comfortable with this technology, I think is job one. It's easy to look around and say, oh, you know, we have all these different AI tools and we're playing with all these things, and some people are playing with this coding tool and some people are... This is all part of getting comfortable with what's possible, right? Because we're going to need to understand what is possible in order to think about what are the best problems for us to then solve. So experiment, prototype, test. Yes, control your costs in that process, but get into the tool set. AI is not LLM. AI is LLMs, it's agents, it's agentic workflows, it's full coding end to end, right? New applications. So get your ecosystem and your employees and the people architecting this stuff comfortable. Number two, recognize that this is as much a people and process transformation as it is technology. You can't buy AI. You don't buy a thing that is AI. AI is a new fundamental construct on which you will build the next generation of value for your business.
Right.
And so thinking about how do we make this process better is super critical, because when we're going to be looking at humans plus machine, we're going to be looking at how humans and machines actually work together to drive incremental value. That's also going to mean that some of the processes we built that were human to human aren't necessary,
right.
Don't make sense. And number three, focus on what I talked about earlier. This is an AI factory delivering an output. Be clear going in, what is the output we are trying to achieve? Don't focus on how big can I build my factory and how many GPUs can I buy and how much, yes, infrastructure is important, but start with the output. Then look at the raw material. Do I have the data to support it? Do I have the capabilities of my data platform to find the data, to classify the data, to curate it, to index it? Now I can go buy the right infrastructure and I can get maximum efficiency out of those GPUs doing what they were designed to do, which is ultimately driving towards that end outcome.
Shawn and Jason, great conversation. I wish we can sit more, but I'm sure you have other places to go. Great to have you stopping by theCUBE.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
And you're watching theCUBE, the leader in live tech coverage and in-depth tech analysis. We'll be right back.